we start chapter 3 of the Odyssey. This lecture is for chapter 3 of the Odyssey. So, in a series of flashbacks, Odysseus begins to entertain the Phoenicians by his story, right? So, we're going to kind of get a mix of stories post the Trojan War. Now, chronology doesn't mean a whole lot, so some of these things might be a little out of order and would not have been as confusing for his audience, who didn't really care about stories being told chronologically. But we do learn that Odysseus has left Troy with his army by ship, and they land at the Isle of Ismarus, where the army, hungry, just finished war, goes and do what armies do. They took what they want. They took the food, the treasure, the women. They would have killed the men, divided it amongst the warriors. Now Odysseus, after they've taken over this land, Odysseus wants to leave, but his men were too drunk to leave. So they delayed, and that delay enabled the survivors to call for help from a neighboring mainland. Now, this army was more numerous and better equipped for battle than the people of Ismarus were. So, there is another battle. Morning brings another battle, and Odysseus and his army are not victorious in this. So, the battle ends with many of Odysseus' men being lost and their army retreating to another island where the men are supplying for fresh water and other supplies. So, eager to avoid another battle, Odysseus sends a few of his men to determine the nature of the natives and whether or not they would be able to resupply on friendly terms. There's some personification used here about heaven. Heaven having hands. Now, heaven doesn't actually have hands, but this personification is when non-human things are given human characteristics. So, Odysseus and his men are on the island of the Lotus Eaters. So, the inhabitants of the island give lotus flowers to Odysseus' spies to eat. They forget all about their mission and their desire to return home and all other worldly cares. So Odysseus has to actually go get the men himself. They don't want to leave, so he handles them, brings them back to the ship, and away they sail. There's a lesson to be learned here. Don't do drugs, right? And on to the next isle they go. So as they're going home, they're stopping at all these different islands and lands. This is going to be the island of the Cyclops. Now, I don't know whether or not Odysseus and his men knew that this was the island on the Cyclops. It looks like they're, again, wanting to resupply. So Odysseus leaves with some fresh wine in search of any inhabitants, ready to offer them a gift. Now, he's acting less like a warrior here, right, compared to the other islands, and more like a house guest. So Odysseus takes 12 of his men, and they find an enormous cave filled with sheep and cheese. Now, his men want to steal it and sell away, but Odysseus wants to stay and meet the owners. He thinks that perhaps they may give him a gift, right? He's a very famous warrior and king, after all. He's also very curious to see who can use an enormous club in the corner. So, his men eat the cheese while they wait. Now, a little foreshadowing. When Odysseus finds a club taller than he, what can we infer about the owner? It's going to be one big dude, right? I mean, the whole mood here. An enormous cave, enormous piles of cheese, enormous sheep, an enormous club. You would think that the size of this mountain and cave and club would warn the men that maybe it's a little dangerous sticking around. But I think it's important to also remember that Odysseus and his men just survived a 10-year war against the unbeatable city of Troy and are filled with pride as they return home. I mean, Odysseus is kind of like that, right? I think we should stay here and maybe somebody will give me a gift because I, after all, am Odysseus. I am great. And in walks the Cyclops. So the Cyclops returns to his cave with sheep that he had out at pasture. I mean, we can see how big he is just based on the size of the sheep. So, maybe we should have left. Now, this gentleman's name is Polyphemus. He is a Cyclops. He is a son of Poseidon, a nature spirit. So, they were not gods, but they were direct sons of gods. He rolls his door, a gigantic boulder in the front of the cave, sealing Odysseus and his men inside. And Odysseus begins to worry, right? There is no way out. There's no way that we could even open this door, and we are now at the mercy of our host. So the Cyclops turns on them and demands to know who they are and where they're from. So Odysseus doesn't answer all of this question. He simply tells them that they're Achaeans, right? And they're on their way home from Troy and begs for his hospitality. And he reminds his host, so you can maybe see he's a little nervous here, that Zeus blesses all those who help travelers. Now, this did not go how Odysseus planned. It enrages the Cyclops, a son of Poseidon, who has no love for Zeus. Oh boy, what is going to happen? The Cyclops, not a complete fool, asks about Odysseus' ship. And Odysseus, he lies. Smart, right? Maybe we can see why Athena likes this guy. Creator of the Trojan horse, finally showing some battle wisdom here. Tells them that it was destroyed by Poseidon and that these 12 men and himself are all that remain. The Cyclops doesn't even answer. He simply picks 2 of the men and eats them in front of Odysseus and the rest of his men. Now, Odysseus has brought some of this on himself, right? He had the opportunity just to take the food and leave, but he wanted to stay. He wanted to meet the man who could wield that club. He felt that maybe once the person met him and knew who he was, he would be given a gift and a prize. This is not going how Odysseus had planned at all. So Odysseus watches in horror as his men are smashed on the ground until they're dead, torn limb from limb, and devoured by the Cyclops. Cyclops simply finishes his meal, washes it down with some milk, and takes a nap. Odysseus' men now turn to their leader and go, "What are we going to do? How do we get out of here?" There's an onomatopoeia given here. It's one of the first ones that we've seen in the book, this snore. Words that are written that sound exactly like they're written. Again, used to show the reader that the Cyclops is asleep instead of telling the reader. So that's an onomatopoeia. Now, one of the first responses is to take his sword and try to kill the Cyclops. But Odysseus quickly realizes if he does this, if he kills the Cyclops, they are all going to be stuck in the cave, and Odysseus can't figure out a way out of this. So, when you can't figure out a way out, sit and wait. So Odysseus spends the night planning while his men sobbed and sighed. So morning light creeps in through the crack of the door. Cyclops awakes, lights the fire, completely ignores the captive, and has a morning meal. Another 2 men. So that internal conflict, right? Odysseus wanting to kill the Cyclops but realizing he had to wait. That internal conflict leads to the death of 2 more men. Cyclops leaves. That's tough. These men have been with each other for 10 years in war. Okay, let's continue. Another Monopoeia right here, by the way, that, yeah. Okay, so Odysseus is pissed. A quiet look of determination falls upon him. Athena's wisdom and cunning is manifesting itself just as it did at the end of the Trojan War. When Odysseus' back is against the corner, this man is on. So the men are freaking out. But Odysseus, he now has a plan. They are going to make it out alive. They take his club, Polyphemus' club, and they sharpen it into a point. And then he puts it in the fire and chars the point so that it can be easily reignited when the time is right. We're going to come back to why they do this here in a moment. So, later that day, Cyclops returns. He eats at least 2 more men for dinner. Odysseus always stands at the front of his men, at least in the story that he's telling the Phoenicians, right? And the Cyclops is always reaching behind him for the men who are less courageous than Odysseus. After Cyclops sits down to rest after the dinner of his men, Odysseus walks up to him and offers him wine. The wine that he had brought for those who hosted him and his men. He reminds the Cyclops that he must be thirsty after eating so many people, and Odysseus offers him the wine so that he might be known for his good winemaking. Cyclops drinks bowl after bowl of the wine before getting drunk. Maybe another life lesson here. Don't drink. He's more pleasant now, and he begins to talk with Odysseus. The Cyclops says that he does, in fact, have a present, have a gift for Odysseus. What present? Well, first, Cyclops wants to know his name. So, Odysseus, being cautious, being smart, being wise, tells Polyphemus that his name is Noman. Little punny, little clever, right? Noman. Kind of like Roman, but Nomen, if said slowly enough, might sound like no man. Okay, here's the gift. Here's the present. Cyclops tells Odysseus that he will eat all of his friends first, saving Odysseus for last. Odysseus watches the Cyclops pass out from his drinking, gets the men to reignite the club and that they made into a point like the spear, and takes it. Odysseus, placing himself in the front, the most dangerous part, the part that's on fire, ram it into the Cyclops' eye. Oof. Ouch. Now, this page now cuts away to other Cyclopses on the island. Polyphemus is not alone. Many other Cyclops, all children of Poseidon, live here tending sheep, leading quiet lives away from the heroes, the quests, the wars of men. But the entire island hears the shouts and screams of Polyphemus as Odysseus turns the spear in his eye, putting all of his weight into it. The imagery describes how the eye boils and steams as the flames lick the soft flesh. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Okay. That is great. There's a little alliteration here, the boiling blood, the b-b sound. That's called an alliteration. We get another onomatopoeia. And, okay. This next side panel, the other Cyclopses come running when they hear Polyphemus' continued screaming. And they ask, why are you yelling? Like, it's late at night. Bro, keep it down. What is going on? And they're like, surely no man is causing you any trouble, right? Again, these are giants, powerful giants. It'd be ludicrous to think that somebody would be attacking them. And Polyphemus answers that no man is trying to kill him. Now, the genius of Odysseus' name. The Cyclops find it funny that he could be yelling so much when no man is trying to kill him. So they assume he's just like whining and complaining about maybe like a stomach ache. So they tell him, pray to Poseidon and let them all go back to sleep. The Cyclops is even more enraged when they leave. And he tells Odysseus and his men that they will never leave the cave. However, Odysseus had a plan. He does not want to die in the cave, so his scheme, he gets his men to tie the sheep of Polyphemus together in threes and to run a man underneath the middle sheep. When Cyclops lets the sheep out to pasture, Odysseus and his men are just going to walk out strapped underneath the sheep. So, Odysseus, not being able to be strapped underneath a sheep, holds himself to the bottom of the largest ram, and the Cyclops actually picks this one up and talks to it, wondering why it is the last to leave the cave. Again, there's more irony here, situational irony. Polyphemus needs to open the door to let his flocks out, but in doing so, he provides Odysseus and his men the means to escape. Although he checks the top of the sheep, he does not check the bottom. Now again, this is gutsy of Odysseus. There could be a whole lot of things that go wrong here. As the men are exiting, Polyphemus picks up the ram, the alpha, the one that he knows, and talks to him. Talks to him as though the sheep could communicate, right? Now, it's not that he's crazy. He is trying to figure out where Odysseus and his men are. So Odysseus and his men, freed, go back to their ship, and they start to sail away. And as they sail away, Odysseus shouts back to the Cyclops and antagonizes him. He tells the Cyclops that the Cyclops was prideful, and now he has paid the price for underestimating Odysseus and eating his men. He tells him that all that has happened to Polyphemus is the will of the gods. They have punished him for his pride. The Cyclops picks up an entire piece of the island, throwing it at the sound of their voice. Almost kills them. Now, there's going to be some irony here. Odysseus is lecturing the Cyclops on his pride, right? You were so prideful, and your pride led to your downfall. Let's look at what Odysseus does. Now, Odysseus' men are freaked out, right? By the mountain being thrown at them. And they beg Odysseus to stop mocking and antagonizing the Cyclops. As they say, hindsight is 20/20. So Odysseus realizes that he should have listened to his men. They continue sailing out, but he cannot resist. He turns back to Polyphemus and tells him his name and where he lives. That is horrible. Now, there's a prophecy that nobody knew about other than the Cyclops that said Polyphemus would lose his sight by one named Odysseus. But Polyphemus thought that Odysseus would be some strong warrior like Hercules, not a lying weakling like Odysseus. Odysseus continues to antagonize Poseidon when he says that not even Poseidon could cure his son's eye. Now, Polyphemus prays to Poseidon to either kill Odysseus or make his journey long, and that he would return home to his kingdom in disarray. So Poseidon hears this prayer and answers it. And we now learn why Poseidon hates Odysseus so much.
We know why Poseidon wrecked the raft that Odysseus was on. We know that Odysseus is in this conflict with Poseidon because he was prideful. As he lectures Polyphemus on pride, Odysseus, proud of himself for the taking of Polyphemus' eye and the escape on the island, tells Polyphemus who he is and where he lives, which allows Polyphemus to pray to Poseidon against Odysseus. Imagine if Odysseus had kept his mouth shut. Polyphemus would have prayed to Poseidon that Poseidon take his revenge on no man.
But that's not what Odysseus does. And that is where chapter 3 ends. Now remember, all of this is a flashback to the Phoenicians as Odysseus is recounting his story. And that ends chapter 3.